Other interesting political news, you have United Auto Workers live stream of President Shawn Fain on October 20th, but without censorship and with my charming personality. Now, I say that because, as usual, the comment section on these videos are, of course, by default, disabled. And while I might not agree with everything in the comment section, or many people in general, I'm an old soul in terms of I might not agree with everything you're saying, but I'll fight to the death for your right to say it. Partially because I'm an American, that's what Americans should believe, and that's what we were founded on. So, again, we may not agree on many of the issues, and truth be told, I had a great conversation with someone who had a disagreement in terms of the philosophy of how a society should support single mothers and the babies, and we had a good back and forth, and while I didn't agree with this person's methodology, and I explained my position, we both wanted to address the situation and assist with the proper situation. We just had different methodologies on how to get there. And we were pretty calm and collected. We didn't have a angry back and forth. And lo and behold, I found it a fascinating topic and we were able to have a good back and forth. So if you disagree with what I'm saying about this coverage, let me know. And if you're someone at the UAW, if you're someone working the front lines, I'd be fascinated to hear your perspective. Do you love Shawn Fain? I mean, he got voted in. I mean, a lot of people wanted to strike in general. And if you're part of the big three, and perhaps you want to remain anonymous for security reasons, let me know. Do you agree with the UAW? Or do you think it'll bankrupt the company? Again, more conversation, the better. And as wise man once said, sunlight is the best disinfectant. And I always think the best, in terms of what ideas come to the top, I think the best cordial exchange of ideas and perhaps a debate is the best thing to go forward. And lastly, before I start the video, if you have suggestions on picture-in-picture production software, I appreciate the feedback if you have any suggestions. I say this because I know there are many ways to do it post-production, but with the current resource allocation I have now and my time constraints, I really need something that can do picture-in-picture during production. I did try a brand by the name of XSplit, but my camera, which is a USB Hyper, was a Razer Hyken 4K. It wouldn't recognize the camera even after I updated the drivers. So if you have suggestions, I would appreciate it because I do want to make the show better for everyone. And as cliche as it sounds, together we can make it better. So without further ado, I will go ahead and I will start the video. In terms of, I don't want to say slacking, but a wise man once said, every man should always suit up for every important occasion in your life. Well, personally, I also do it from just grocery shopping, since optimally for time, best to do it from coming back from a meeting. But nevertheless, Shawn has acquiesced from a suit. Last week he was in a sweater, which he got from a gift from a European Union that came to visit. Now he's in a sweater. I'm not saying it's pathetic, but yeah. Although, to his credit in terms of marketing, it does have a UAW embroidered on. So that, I'm not saying silkscreen isn't the best, but I'm saying embroidery is pretty fancy. That's pretty Cadillac, as the youth might say. That's a joke because the youth don't buy Cadillacs. Well, many people don't. Although the CTS4 with the stick shift, twin turbo V6 the stick, that's brilliant Detroit engineering. I wish they would do more of it, but again, GM wants Cadillac to be full EV by 2030. GM all to be EV by 2035. It'll be interesting to see if that works out. But nevertheless, UAW Shawn Fain.
Good afternoon, UAW family. Today we're going to take a closer look at where things stand in bargaining with the Big Three. In the past 24 hours, we've got new offers from 2 of the 3 companies. So despite all the bluster about how much the companies have stretched, there's clearly still room to move.
Squeeze blood from that rock. Johnny Rocco, I think that was the old movie. Key Largo, brilliant film with Humphrey Bogart. I knew I'd remember it. I get there eventually. But nevertheless, back to the video.
But there's also a lot going on across our union, not just in the Big Three. This week, nearly 1,000 UAW members walked out on strike at 3 casinos here in Detroit as part of the Detroit Casino Council. During the pandemic, these workers barely got a raise, so they've...
Yes, most companies also almost went out of business. Many did actually go out of business. And actually, during the peak pandemic, no one was buying vehicles. Ironically enough, when the pandemic first started, that was the best time to buy a vehicle. You can buy it they were giving out huge incentives. I guess maybe he's talking about the end when the supply chain and everything got messed up with the semiconductor lack of production, and then they started to increase. Which, again, if you look at the profits, the dealerships made the most profits with the markups, which are separate business entities. There's no benefits to the main companies that produce the product, such as GM, Ford, and Stellantis. But nevertheless,
launched the first ever wall-to-wall casino strike. Yesterday, we joined those members, along with Blue Cross Blue Shield UAW members on strike and Big Three UAW members on strike. Secretary Treasurer Margaret Mock and Vice President Mike Booth told the crowd that this isn't just about one industry or one workplace. It's about the whole working class finally standing up to corporate greed. Sunday night, the master contract will expire, covering 1,100 workers at General Dynamics in Region 1, Region 2B, and Region 9. At a time when there's endless money for war, somehow there's still no money for the working class.
An interesting political topic. I wonder if you'll lean into that interesting idea. Now, fun business fact of the day. Back in World War II, all these companies actually supported the war effort because partially we didn't have a specific defense industry for the most part in the United States. GM actually made everything from tanks to machine guns. IBM prolifically made the M1 carbine, as well as doing, well, maybe we say the most morally vacuous manufacturer and maintenance of devices in history. Don't look up IBM in World War II. I'll just say that much. So it'll be interesting to see. That is a very politically hot topic in the United States, is defense budget. Although in terms of ROI, and well, you could also defend the defense of the United States and why we haven't been invaded. In terms of, there are many very beneficial things in terms of geography. I was gonna say the borders are a joke, and for the most part, but a lot of people attribute our defense industry for that reason as well. Because again, if you look at the world, the United States has the most advanced tech, bar none, when it comes to the defense industry. There's a reason the largest defense contractors on the planet, they're all headquartered here. Think about it. You have Boeing, which was the original, the OG in terms of aerospace and manufacturing. Funny, many people think they're commercial today in terms of commercial manufacturing for the planes we fly on for work and fun, but they were best well known back in the day for war manufacturing and military vehicles. So you have Boeing, they're headquartered in the United States. You have Lockheed Martin, the largest defense contractor in the world, most prolifically known for making the F-35 Lightning II, the most advanced jet fighter in history. You also have Northrop Grumman. You also have Raytheon, which combined with, I believe, Collins Aerospace, they're most well known for the Patriot II missile, as well as the the Johnny Stark, not Johnny Stark, Tony Stark, the Raytheon Sarcos II exoskeleton, which disappeared. I can't help but think they're secretly still working on that. And then they also remained, if you Call of Duty, the Javelin, which is a very famous missile, which is shoulder fired and it looks like it's going to hit the ground and it goes up. All the research and development, the headquarters for all these huge defense companies are all headquartered here for a very strategic reason. So, many fun business facts of the day. Let me know if you think it's too much ADHD or if you do or do not appreciate the somewhat correlated tangents I go on.
Shamefully, General Dynamics won't even agree to make Veterans Day a paid holiday, despite 25% of their workforce being military veterans.
That is not good, politically speaking. I almost laughed because that is certainly a business blunder. When you look at the defense industry, they overwhelmingly hire veterans. It's a mutually beneficial relationship. It makes logical sense. It's a great morale booster. The fact they don't have Veterans Day off, again, you ask me how many holidays we should have off, basically zero. I work 105 hours a week. I'm very selective of what holidays I think should actually exist. Now, Veterans Day, that's one of perhaps 5 or 6 holidays I think should continue to exist if and when I become president or whatever. So the fact that's not a paid holiday, that's pretty bad. I suspect the way he's phrasing it, it's not a paid holiday. I suspect it's a holiday, but perhaps it's not paid. I need to dig deeper because that, on its face value, makes no sense for a defense company not to have that day off, especially as he says, given the demographic. So interesting enough, people think I have a disdain towards Shawn Fain, or I don't agree with everything. I don't agree with most of what he says, but in this case, as cliche as it sounds, there is a little common ground. I think that should be a paid holiday off if, again, you're a defense contractor and General Dynamics doesn't have that for them. And that's just, in terms of just PR alone, that's a terrible business blunder. Let me know in the comments if you think, for that particular case, should that be a day off or not? I guess the only exception might be wartime, which, again, you can also argue when is the United States is or is not at war, and you need the production of the support material, the trainings, and the infrastructure to support the troops, which, again, that's a defense company. So, a little nuance there.
Last weekend, I went out to Pennsylvania and Maryland to meet with our nearly 4,000 members on strike at Mack Trucks. After voting down a tentative agreement by 73%, the members are ready to fight for more, and we've got their back 100%. Region 8 Director Tim Smith, Region 9 Director Dan Vicente, and myself went out there for strategy meetings with the membership and bargaining committees to talk about how we can do things differently, fight harder, and win bigger. The bargaining team met with Mack this week, and the company basically said they just wanted to rearrange the deck chairs and try to get a revote. But the members have already spoken. The council said no, and we expect Mack to come back with something real and quick. At ZF in Alabama, members recently voted to ratify a new agreement that will close the wage tier and grant more time off the job. These members stood strong on strike for a month and have a new contract to show for it. And just about an hour ago, our members at Thaumbert in Newton, Iowa have secured a tentative agreement. They've held the line since August 1st and will vote tomorrow on this deal. Congratulations to those workers on this important milestone. Meanwhile, we're still standing strong with our Region 9 members at Dometic and West Rock, who have been fighting like hell for a fair deal. Just this week, Local 1391 members at CVR Nitrogen, a fertilizer plant in East Dubuque, Illinois, voted 88-2 to reject the employer's latest offer and walked out on strike. The employer recently decided to mess with the workers' 401k, and our members in Region 4 aren't going to take that lying down. They stood up and joined the picket lines on Wednesday afternoon. At the Big Three, we're now well over a month into our stand-up strike. Our members on the line, especially those at our first stand-up targets at Local 900, Local 12, and Local 2250, have been out in the rain, in the cold, living off strike pay, wondering about the future.
Which, again, I can't help but think strike pay. What's that? Again, this isn't going to go on for a year. I wouldn't think that. But what if you got paid strike pay for a year? And I know public schools, I partially blame the teachers' unions. They're at all-time low for, well, everything in terms of testing, history, science, math. The ACT scores at a 32-year low. And yet the teachers' unions say they deserve more money every year. Nevertheless, we'll do a little fun education here today to make up for their ineptitudes. Now, they're making $500 per week. Now, there are 52 weeks in a year. So, if you multiply those two numbers, 52 weeks times $500 per week, means in the year they made $26,000 to strike. Which, I was going to say, early in my career, I didn't make that much money when I was working full time. Yeah, alone when I was chilling with the picket sign. So 26 grand per year, which also means you wouldn't pay taxes, I don't believe, based on the U.S. tax code. Another topic for another time. And again, I'm not a doctor. I'm not saying if you click the subscribe button, it'll ensure that I never stutter again. But it may be the cure. It might be. We don't know. Cannot hurt to try. But nevertheless, 26 grand a year. That's not a pretty penny, because again, pennies are 99.99% zinc. So we'll say a vintage pretty penny.
I want to acknowledge the incredible courage and fortitude of these members and all of those holding the line.
Courage? Really? Come on. I mean, the United States, that word has become so diluted. Does it really mean anything anymore? But nevertheless.
Ability to hold out, to hit the companies economically, and to withhold our labor. This is our leverage, and this is our path to victory. We have one tool, and that's solidarity. Everything we do, our picket lines, our rallies, our videos, and these Facebook Live remarks is in the service of building our solidarity and using it to win at the bargaining table. Let me tell you what the company's path to victory is.
Interesting enough, although they don't believe in free speech in terms of having the comments open or the like button, I mean, YouTube, the company censored the dislike button because they were scared of, public knowledge of how bad some videos are. It is ridiculous. They say it was to protect children's feelings, which, again, it's BS. If you go into the YouTube studio, the back end where you upload the videos, they'll still tell you the ratio. But nevertheless, the comments, they actually had a live stream, and the comments here are saying they're about half agreeing with Shawn, but a lot of the comments are imploring him to extremely escalate the strike, so increase the number of workers who are actually walking off. So interestingly enough, from a political perspective, again, moving on the political chessboard, could Shawn lose favor after a certain amount of weeks? Because either he's not being radical enough or he's not pushing enough, so to say, in terms of increasing the strike against the big three, or if they think he's conceding or giving a consent. Yeah, it'll be interesting. But yeah, a lot of people in the comments are actually wanting him to ramp it up, which makes sense. That one of the reasons they voted for him is because that was what he kind of campaigned on. He was known for being, I don't want to say creating conflict like a divorce lawyer, but yeah, creating conflict to prove the value and, to strike. But nevertheless, back to Shawn.
Fear, uncertainty, doubt, and division. Everything they do is in the service of fragmenting our membership.
Well, what about everything they do is also for the shareholders and the customers? That's when you look at GM, when you look at all these companies, the ripple effect and balancing everything. You can't only think about the workers. Like in terms of, if you were to give the UAW what they originally asked for, again, that was valued between $80 and $100 billion. That would bankrupt Ford. That would bankrupt Stellantis again. And GM, depending on what year the profits are, it would have broke them even, or they would have gone into the negative. And again, with GM, they still have long-term debt of billions upon billions of dollars. We're talking, I believe, 91 billion is the last article I saw of that, which again, eventually they need to pay off. Although perhaps like the U.S. government, they'll just kick the can down the road forever. So again, it'll be interesting to see, because again, from a CEO perspective, they have to try to make everyone happy, or realistically try to make sure everyone is as acceptable as possible. Because again, they have shareholders to think about who are investing in these companies, people who are dependent on the dividends they pay out. There are a lot of variables in this equation. I can't imagine the accountant or the team, more accurately probably, who's looking at every single one of these proposals and looking at the fiscal impact it'll have across all these plants, across all of these shareholders. So if anything, I'm actually surprised both sides, the UAW and the big three, they don't negotiate these contracts out almost, I don't know, like years out. Like, again, there's such a long contract.
They want you to think, what if they really do close a plant?
Well, yeah, so that they've done that for decades. Sometimes they have to. Every business, or most businesses, have to, both because of profits and some because of consumer preferences. Sometimes you have to do that. I'm not saying it's a good thing, but sometimes it's reality of business, and sometimes, depending on the cost and the quality of the plant, it just makes sense to tear it down or shut it down and make a new one, maybe dedicated to a new product. And depending on the configuration of the plant and everything, it may or may not make sense. But nevertheless, I'll partially digress.
That's fear. They want you to think, do I really know where this is headed? That's uncertainty. They hope you're wondering, does my union leadership really have my best interests at heart? And that's the doubt. Every time these company executives open their mouth, it is to increase the fear, increase the uncertainty, and increase the doubt among the membership.
I'm not going to say you'd be a good salesman, but some people pejoratively talk about sales representatives and their job. And some, I believe, I don't do this and I don't approve of this methodology, but many of them will use that methodology of the FUD, fear, uncertainty, and the doubt. What if you don't buy this product? What's the consequences if, how much is it going to cost your company if you don't initiate this new practice, if you don't buy this new widget, if you don't implement this new rule, or you don't get this new contract? So interestingly enough, I don't know if it's, let me know in the comments. I do think it's more of I don't appreciate that approach. It's not my approach with my business, but it is interesting that he's bringing up this very common business practice. I think most Americans do not approve of the sales methodology. I think many people find it distasteful, which is why he's bringing it up. So from a political perspective, I think it's wise of him to bring up this methodology and bring it to kind of enlighten the methodology in which he sees them or he perceives them doing.
They win when we lose our sense of purpose, when we lose our sense of unity. And I've heard some members asking, when will we vote on this? Some members think maybe we've gotten as far as we can get, and it's time to settle. I want to be clear. The membership is the highest authority in our union. You will always have the final say.
Their membership is down year over year, so that perhaps isn't the best thing to bring up.
Everything we do is in service of building the strength of our membership and building a better future for UAW members and the entire working class. But when we vote, it will be from a place of strength. You don't make decisions on your future out of fear, uncertainty, or doubt. That's a recipe for disaster. That's what we've done for decades in this union. For years, we've been playing defense at every step, and we've been going backwards. When we vote on a tentative agreement, it will be because your leadership and your council thinks we've gotten absolutely every dollar we can. We've looked at the company's proposals. We've costed their offer. And in my opinion, and in the opinion of the vice presidents, and in the opinion of your national negotiators, there is more to be won. One thing we've been hearing over and over from these companies is how they've offered us record contracts. They stole that line from us, by the way. And you know what? We agree.
Is that really something like a record? Who first used that term? Use the term record contracts. That's disappointing. The Brave search is pretty much, when I look up, well, that makes sense. Who first used the term record contracts? It's all about contracts for the record industry. Which, if you're a youth, or I was going to say, records used to be these things you used to use to play music. The record industry was a thing that helped facilitate bands and music and recording studios to come together. They used to use a thing called vinyl, and you have a needle on the vinyl. But I know I'm an old soul. I will digress back into the actual content.
These are already record contracts. But they come at the end of decades of record decline.
Yeah, also, isn't the market share declining? I mean, these companies, the big three made Detroit back in the day. Detroit used to be the richest city on the planet, a cultural phenomenon. I mean, they were the big three. You had GM, Chrysler, Ford, and then competition reared its head. And for better or worse, they didn't adapt properly. They lost market share. There's a reason why Honda, Toyota, they grow exponentially. Even Kia and Hyundai, in terms of their quality, they've come a long way. Heck, in the past 10 years, that company's grown astronomically into making an impressive product, albeit not enough stick shifts if you ask me. But yeah, the big three, they're becoming less of the big three. In part, I think a mixture of many things on a very single variable analysis of the situation. But a couple of things being the cost of labor already being higher than the competition, and the quality of the vehicles going down on average. I mean, it's not what they used to be. And my family, many of them came from Michigan. I mean, the stories out here were astronomical about how good things used to be. But again, that's also because they had a majority market share too. They were huge. So, I mean, again, my 3 cents for the moment, should be 2 cents, but 40-year hyperinflation, should charge 4 cents, but I'm a generous man. Though still free to click the subscribe button. It's one of those things where times are just changing. So it'll be interesting to see. But nevertheless, what does Shawn continue to say?
So it's not enough to be the best ever when auto workers have gone backwards over the last 2 decades. That's a very low bar. I also find it a pathetic irony that every time they make an offer, it's the best they can do. It's a record offer. And then 2 days later, there's a new record.
I agree. Again, they should have been steadfast in their very first offer. Again, depending on what negotiation tactic you prefer, I personally find it a waste of time to get back and forth for weeks over a stupid price point. I like to be pretty straightforward and transparent when it comes to my business. I say, here, this is the quality service we provide. This is the best price for this value. I mean, life's too short. I'm transparent. There's a certain price point we need to be at to either actually stay fruitful as a business so we can actually grow and reinvest into ourselves. I mean, so in terms of Shawn Fain, I actually agree on this point. GM and Ford and Chrysler this year just came out with their best offer. Again, given the politics of this situation, I don't think they would have worked anyway. Because again, Shawn Fain, he pulled the members of the UAW. They wanted to strike. So I guess I'm not surprised they keep coming back to the table. But yeah, from a negotiation standpoint, kind of makes it look weak. Let me know in the comments if you think different, if a different, in terms of negotiation tactic, would have worked in this case. But again, I think at a certain point, actually hilariously similar to the situation, when you go to a car dealership, you have to just be willing to walk away if the deal doesn't make sense. And right now, depending on the finances, the numbers are changing on an hourly basis with all these different proposals going back and forth. You just have to say we can't do it. So it'll be interesting to see what the final offer ends up being. But Shawn has a point here in terms of it's not making the big three look good when every week or every 2 weeks they just give a little bit more. I mean, it's making Shawn look great. I mean, the optics are good for his party. The members are seeing Shawn get more and more every time he goes up to bat for them. So, I mean, it's almost as if they're actively helping this guy.
What that should tell you is there's room to move. This week, while we were literally at the bargaining table, GM released a video. And in that video, a millionaire GM executive asked our members directly, with all that on the table, why are we on strike? Meanwhile, the next day, the wage increase goes up, the progression goes down, and the retirement money goes up. That's why we're on strike. Because these extremely profitable companies have more to give. Last week, we took out the biggest auto plant in the country. The brave members at Ford's Kentucky truck plant joined the stand-up strike on a moment's notice and delivered a serious message and a serious economic blow to Ford Motor Company.
I'm not saying they should move that plant, but move that plant. I mean, again, I talked about it earlier in the show. If you're watching the whole show today, we talked about how the UAW just walked off from Chrysler, Dodge, Ram's Ford pickup production line. They watched about 6,800 workers walked off that site. Trucks are the bread and butter of Ford Motor Company. The internal combustion engine trucks is where they make a majority of their profit to fuel their EV fleet, which is, again, they're trying to get profitable. They're losing money now. The only reason they're in business is because of the internal combustion engine and that profit from it. So it is a big blow to kneecap them at that plant because, again, that's the lifeblood of the company. And, again, politically speaking, they know that.
As we said last week, it wasn't just Ford who was going to get the message. It was Stellantis and General Motors as well. I'm happy to report that in the past 24 hours, we've seen serious movement from both Stellantis and GM. Meanwhile, Ford continues to stew about KTP and pretend they can't afford what we're asking for. On Monday, Bill Ford went to the Rouge to talk the same old talk about needing to stay sustainable and competitive. He said if the workers get our share of economic justice, he'd have to close plants like the Rouge. We took those comments seriously. For all their talk about wanting to invest in American jobs, they have the audacity to come to the Rouge and imply they might close it down while they make billions in profits off the products our members build there.
It's almost, I swear, I don't know if he's never read a business book. Now, granted, he's appealing towards his audience. I understand that. But, I mean, these companies reinvest their money, and they actually have shareholders to reward and actually incentivize to actually not sell their stock as well, because they pay dividends as well. So, sounds like a bad relationship. Like, it's not all about you. But nevertheless, we'll continue to him.
It's never going to be enough for these people. We've taken cutbacks.
He's not looking in a mirror. I was sworn he was for a second there, but no, he was not.
After cutback, done give back after give back over the past 20 years. And what do we have to show for it? 65 plants closed in 20 years. Real wages down 30% over 20 years.
Is he going to tell us how many of those plants relocated?
Jobs killed and standards gone.
No, I guess he's not. Again, sometimes plants are sold because they don't produce a product the product doesn't need it anymore. And in some cases, you can't, depending on what you're building, what you're manufacturing, it's not really advantageous to try to retool a plant. I'm not saying every situation, but certainly sometimes that is the case. So we look at the Chevy Cruze, which I thought was actually a good little vehicle. Granted, it's because the engine and the transmission was built. The transmission came from Austria, interestingly enough. If you bought the correct Chevy Cruze, the one with the manual transmission, like everyone should have had by default. But nevertheless, if you look at that vehicle, one of the reasons GM sold the Lordstown plant to it would become famously owned by Lordstown EV, which would go bankrupt. But the reason GM was selling it is because the consumer demand for the product was fleeting year over year, so it was decreasing in sales every year, and it just didn't make sense to keep the plant open anymore. But nevertheless, back to Shawn.
Bill Ford said it shouldn't be Ford versus the UAW. He said it should be the UAW and Ford against foreign automakers. I want to be crystal clear on one thing. The days of the UAW and Ford being a team to fight other companies are over.
Again, the divorce attorney always create conflict.
We won't be used in this phony competition. We will always and forever be on the side of working people everywhere.
The competition that's literally eating your lunch.
Non-union auto workers are not the enemy. Those are our future union family.
No, they aren't. I say that because most of those employees, they actually like the ability to negotiate their own contracts, to argue that, hey, I'm better than Bob at this assembly, I should be paid more by my individual merit. And in terms of Tesla, no one would ever want to join a union because Tesla employees, in terms of the assembly line workers, they get stock options. So what would you rather have? A flat rate fee that all your colleagues get paid the same amount regardless of performance, or Tesla stock? Which again, historically speaking, that stuff is, I was about to say it's worth more than its weight in gold, but stock is, they actually don't even print stock certificates, and stock certificates, historically speaking, are just a piece of paper. So perhaps not the best metaphor, but they're worth a darn good amount. So what would you rather have, Tesla stock or to be part of a union working for Tesla? I'm pretty sure I'd take the stock, but I personally work like hell and I like to invest in myself in the upside, but that's just me.
Since the stand-up strike began, we've had thousands of non-union auto workers reaching out, wanting to join our movement. So no, we're not going to partner with Ford in a race to the bottom. And we're not going to partner with the big three to match the low standards of the non-union automakers. Instead, we're going to organize non-union auto workers everywhere. Together, we're going to stand up and take on corporate greed.
Together, we can continue to destroy American manufacturing. Is that I'm a little earwax, perhaps. Is that what he said? Don't forget the largest automotive company, or one of the largest automotive companies that's growing, is BYD in China. They're going to become one of the largest EV manufacturers on the planet, and ironically speaking, the governments these people elected are pushing EV mandates. Those imports are going to be coming sooner than we think, I believe.
Right now, we're striking the big three like we've never struck before. Next, we're going to organize non-union auto companies like we've never organized before. And together, auto workers are going to fight to make sure that auto jobs everywhere are good jobs. Jobs that can sustain a family. Jobs that allow everyone to retire with dignity. Jobs that are essential to the green economy without sacrificing our union standards. So billionaire Bill Ford made his own speech this week, talking down to us and telling us what we should be willing to accept. Literally, the next day, the company made an astounding announcement. Ford Motor E Company said they were going to give an additional $600 million in shareholder dividends this year.
Excellent.
That amount of money alone would amount to about $1 an hour raise for all Ford workers for the entire life of this next contract.
Are those Ford workers buying shares of Ford to be more invested in the company? Again, dividends help grow companies because they incentivize people to buy and hold stock, keeping the price up and increasing the price. So again, if you want to use the emotional rhetoric, I can play that game too. Well, the grandma down the street, she invested her whole life savings into the Ford Motor Company. She can only afford to pay for her groceries because of the dividends Ford Motor Company pays for her. Again, there's a lot of people invested in those companies. They're actually, in terms of real world examples, there are many businesses and many 401ks that are tied up into Ford, including retirees. There are a lot of people who rely on those dividends.
Dividends are just throwing money at Wall Street.
You could buy Ford stock today. It's literally, what is it? It's under $15 per share last time I checked. Let's see, Ford stock today. And again, by the time this is published, it might be a little out. Even a better deal. Well, again, I'm not financial advice. It's under $12 per share, and the dividend yield is 5.23%. So again, there are some people who are going to buy that stock just because they pay those dividends. And any beautiful thing about publicly traded companies, anyone, if you believe in that company, you can invest in it. So anyone can invest in these companies. It's not just the cliche thing that people talk about in terms of Wall Street and fat cats investing in these businesses. There's a lot of hardworking Americans who just set aside $20 a month or $30 a month to buy publicly traded stocks as part of their long-term retirement plan. But that's not, again, Shawn's playing politics and he's appealing towards his audience. And I suspect, not all, but not insignificant portion of his audience is thinking about a single variable analysis and just thinking about their side of the perspective, their side of the equation. They're not thinking about these other variables that I'm bringing up today.
And I don't have to tell you, lavishing money on people who are already rich doesn't improve the business, and it does not improve the economy. It doesn't make Ford more competitive, and it doesn't secure a future for Ford.
It definitely makes it more competitive. If there's two automotive companies, you're thinking about where should I place my money? Which, again, investing in a company that has a divorce constantly going on, aka Ford with the UAW and Ford, same with GM and Chrysler. Perhaps some people would say it's imprudent to begin with because you're just like in Shark Tank. They don't invest in couples because they get divorced a lot and usually bad relationships. But nevertheless, an incentive to purchase their stock over the competition would be they pay dividends. They give you a direct incentive to buy their stock. But nevertheless, back to Shawn.
Investing in our members does all that. What Ford is showing us is that the money is there. They just don't want us to have it.
Again, you're not the only person at the table. A wise man once told me, when you're working in business, you're working with a lot of parties involved, especially in business-to-business sales. A good saying is, everyone at the table gets to eat. And that's true for the shareholders as well. Again, he doesn't want to admit it because, again, that's not his audience. They didn't vote for him. I understand what he's doing here. But, again, they deserve to eat too.
They constantly make statements about a sustainable future, but actions speak louder than words. What's unsustainable is taking the billions we generate in profit and handing them directly to Wall Street. They're telling us there's no more money while they loot the company through the back door. So let's talk about what happened this week at GM, Stellantis, and compare that to Ford. With no new plants out, both companies put a lot more money on the table. That's because they know if they don't move, there will be serious consequences.
The best relationships are extortion-based. A situation.
But it's a balancing act. As we see at Ford, we took their biggest plan out, and they haven't come back with anything new. As I've said countless times, our goal is to get the best agreement possible, not to strike randomly just for the hell of it. Our strategy means we escalate if and only if we think it will win big. So let's look at where we are across the big three. Under wages, at all three companies as of this week, we have a 23% raise on the table. That's up from 20% just a few days ago and up from 9% when they made their first offer. The companies keep saying they hit their limit, and then their limit went up, and we think there's more ground to gain. On the wage tiers, at all three companies, we have killed massive wage tiers.
Wow.
This is a major win.
Which, again, let me know in the comments, do you think that's fair or not? It's fascinating. I love hearing stories about some people who have direct stories working at the UAW at one of the plants where they think this is a great idea. Some people hate it. Personally, because I like to work like hell, I always think I'm, just based on my work ethic and my acumen, depending on the application what I'm doing, I like to think I'm worth more than the guy who just started 2 weeks ago, but some people want there to be kind of a flat rate.
Been a major priority. We believe in equal pay for equal work. At Stellantis, Mopar workers will make production wages. At GM, the CCA and GMCH will make production wages. At Ford, Sterling Axle and Rawsonville will make production wages. This represents huge raises for these members and will end the toxic wage tier divide among these members. Looking at the wage...
Which again, I mean, let me know if you're... It depends, depending on what the job is. Do you think it's fair to have someone who's sitting in an air-conditioned parts room, perhaps, getting paid the same as someone who's sweating, pumping out the body panels for some of these vehicles? Again, some people in the comments, I'd be fascinated to hear what your particular use case is, your particular opinion is, but it seems to be a point of contention when I make the video for the specific subject when it comes to wage tiers. It's fascinating to see that some people who are pro-union are actually against the wage tiers. Again, more data the better. I'd love to hear what you have to say.
Progression. We started these negotiations with a ridiculous 8-year progression. At Ford, we got down to 3 years where it was in the mid-90s. At Stellantis, they're still stuck on a 4-year progression. And at GM, they want the 2-tier progression with 3 years for all current employees and 4 years for future hires. Obviously, that's not going to fly. If Ford can do it, so can GM and Stellantis, and we are not adding a new tier.
Has he ever looked at the 10Ks or the fiscals of all these companies to say they're exactly the same? Again, people keep forgetting, GM is still in long-term debt. Partially because they went bankrupt so bad in 2009, in part because of the high cost of the UAW and all the myriad of benefits they had. So let's just look it up really quick. Here, right here now. What's GM long-term debt? All right, so this is according to macrotrends.com, looking at GM long-term debt 2010 to 2023. So they're saying, again, this is from macrotrends.net, General Motors' long-term debt for the quarter ending June 30th, 2023 was $81.37 billion, a 4.22 increase year over year. Jeez Louise, it's like the U.S. government. Every year it's gone up. Jeez Louise. So again, if you're in long-term debt, depending on what interest rates you get, it may or may not make sense if you're trying to reinvest into a new factory. I know there's a lot of variables, but every year they're getting more in debt. Do you think they can afford much more?
With cost of living, at Ford, we have won cost of living back to where it was in 2009. Something we were told was impossible. At GM, we're really close with some tweaks left to make. And at Stellantis, we've still got a deficient COLA on the table that doesn't kick in for the first year. In regards to profit sharing, at all three companies, we've been able to beat back concessionary profit sharing proposals. At Ford, we've actually enhanced it, and temp workers with 90 days will now be eligible. At GM, we've maintained profit sharing but added eligibility for temps with 1,000 hours on the job. At Stellantis, we've maintained but haven't yet won eligibility for temp workers. In looking at temps, we're fighting to end the abuse of so-called temp workers who make low wages and have fewer rights and little security. At Ford, we've raised the temp wage to $21 an hour, and one conversion of all current temps with 90 days worked or 90 days in.
Again, it's not going to be great for people who want to progress. They're trying to again, it's kind of controlling the market, very similar to the aviation industry in that union. The reason why it's so hard for young people to actually get a job in the aviation commercial sense is the unions want to keep out the youth, and keep out the other talent, so this artificially inflates the wages. In this case, they're disincentivizing the big three to use temp workers, which again, depending on the application, is going to be detrimental to their production.
At GM, we've also hit $21 an hour for temps, with all the temps who have a year in getting immediately converted to full-time. At Stellantis, the temp wage is still at $20 an hour, and we're going to convert thousands of temps. At all three, we're still negotiating a pathway for future temps to get converted to end the abuse of these members. We're fighting hard to win language across the big three that will make sure that temporary work is just that, temporary. Looking at job security, one of our biggest proposals on job security has been the right to strike over plant closures. They can't keep closing plants without any consequences. At Ford and Stellantis, we've won that right. We will keep our jobs secure with the most powerful weapon we have, the strike threat. At GM, the company still won't grant it. Looking at work-life balance, at all three companies, we've won additional holiday, the Juneteenth holiday, and 2 weeks of paid parental leave, a first for our members at the big three. There's still room to grow there. In retirement, we know we need to fix our broken retirement system at the big three. All three companies are now offering a $3 increase to the pension multiplier and boosting the 401k through GM, although GM lags behind. Ford and Stellantis are offering 9.5% employer contribution to the 401k, and GM is offering just 8%.
That's ridiculously good. I know people in the tech industry who aren't getting those types of benefits.
For current retirees, Ford is offering a $250 annual lump sum payment, and GM just a one-time $1,000 lump sum payment. Stellantis isn't offering anything on that front. The skilled trades tool allowance, all three companies are now at $1.50 tool allowance for skilled trades. So what's the punchline? This week, GM and Stellantis got the message loud and clear. They hurried to catch up with Ford. But GM in particular is worrying. They tell us they need a 2-tier wage progression because they expect to do a lot of hiring. At the same time, they threaten product and won't give us the right to strike over plant closures. I wonder how members at Arlington and Flint Truck feel about that. Stellantis has its issues as well. They're still at a 4-year progression. They're still at just $20 for temp workers. They've rejected all increases to retiree pay. I know plenty of members at Sterling Heights Assembly Plant and in Kokomo, Indiana, who aren't going to like that. And Ford is just waiting around, handing out money to Wall Street. I wonder what members at the Rouge thought of Bill Ford's comments implying they might close if we don't settle for what they've offered. The bottom line is we've got cards left to play and they've got money left to spend. That's the hardest part of a strike. Right before a deal is when there is the most aggressive push for that last mile. They just want to wait us out. They want division. They want fear. They want uncertainty. And what we have is our solidarity. We have great negotiators. We have great staff. And we have the best members in the world. We have plans. We have strategies and tactics to keep winning at the table, backed up by some of the most badass unionists in the country. Poll after poll shows we have the overwhelming support of the American public. The U.S. Senate just introduced a resolution to stand with the UAW, and it has bipartisan support. If we stand together, if we have faith, we will win. Not just a good contract, not just a record contract, but a contract that turns the tide. A contract that finally starts to make things right at the Big Three and for auto workers everywhere. Last of all, I just want to remind you all of one thing. We said last week that we're not sticking to Friday expansions. We're going to hit when we need to hit and where we need to hit. This week, we saw the companies try to get in line with one another. Now we need to move that line across all three. Don't let them divide us. Don't let them scare us. And don't let them confuse us. Our cause is just, the money is there, and our strategy is working. Time is on our side, the American public is on our side, and the facts are on our side. So be ready and stay ready to stand up. Thank you.
Well, interesting speech, Mr. Shawn Fain. Now, he says time is on their side, but as he says that, does anyone want a vehicle made by the Big Three right about now? Economic uncertainty, the automotive market is kind of stagnant. Anecdotally speaking, I went to the dealership to have some work done on my vehicle. Now, thankfully, it's just simple maintenance because it's a Honda, but, and again, it's anecdotal evidence, it's one dealer, but I went on a Saturday. And because I'm one of those folks where I like to use my time wisely, I wasn't going to drop off my car and have it come back and pick it up. So I stayed there for a couple hours with my work computer, just kind of working on a couple of upcoming episodes and my IT company. I was there for a few hours. Most of the sales reps were just sitting around. They're usually Saturdays, in terms of dealership activity, that's when people are coming to view. They're coming physically to come view vehicles. You have the sales reps walking up to them and helping them. It's usually busy as can be. It was pretty darn dead. I think partially because of the huge interest rates, the uncertainty of everyone wondering if they'll have a job next. I mean, we talk about it all the time on this show. Most of these companies are laying people off. Geico just laid off 6% of their workforce, about 2,000 employees. I mean, a lot of these companies are laying people off because of economic uncertainty. And at the same time, they want a record contract, which I'm sure they'll get. It's just a matter of how much are they going to get and how much can these companies realistically give before they can't afford to reinvest in themselves, and subsequently maybe they'll go bankrupt again. So, interesting enough, let me know in the comments. Again, I wish I could give you more feedback on what people think, but the video disables the comments on their end. Now, they have the live chat on the side of the screen, and most of those, interestingly enough, many of them want to push Shawn to go on a full strike. And some of them, again, this is anecdotal evidence, this is one live stream, a couple of folks saying, let us vote. A lot of people, many people saying, let us vote. A lot of people saying, increase the strike, do a full walkout. Now, in terms of timing and how much they have in their hand, again, they have about 40,000 members currently on strike. And that's $500 per member per week. So each week, they're spending about $20 million of their slush fund to pay people to strike. Which, again, if you're a UAW member, that's awesome. Usually that money would be going to politicians trying to kill your jobs, ironically enough, because they do a lot of lobbying. But, again, $20 million per week. They had a slush fund of $820 to $850 million. So 800, let's be, it'll be go in the middle, $835 million, let's say they have on hand. Divide by 20 million per week. So that's 41.75 weeks that they can, with the current rate of people not working on the strike, they could pay them to not work. So that's quite a long period of time, how much demand there is for automobiles and how much the Big Three will care. That's the multi-billion-dollar question. So let me know in the comments, how much more will the Big Three give in terms of concessions before they just walk away? Do you think they even have the chutzpah, or do they think they'll actually have they'll just actually walk away at all, or they just continue to acquiesce to many of these demands. Eventually, there's going to be a breaking point where they just say they can't physically do anything. Again, I pity the person, or perhaps more logistically these days, the software that has to take into account all these different variables in order to see if the latest thing they're going to give to the UAW is going to make or break the company. But it'll be interesting to see. Let me know in the comments what you're thinking. It'd be fascinating to hear what you have to say. Thank you again, everyone, for taking the time in to do today. Don't forget to take time to like, subscribe, and comment. Again, I'm trying to get to 4,000 subscribers by the end of October, so you can click that button. I would greatly appreciate it. Also, the comments and the feedback make the show better and better, and I appreciate it, even if it's critical, because that's how you improve the most, I would argue. Also, and lastly, don't forget to take time to tell your family, tell your friends, tell your coworkers, heck, tell your enemies, tell anyone and everyone. Just stay safe, fight the good fight.